All right, Creature Commandos, episode 3. That's right, the bride and Rick Flag set up everything to where we are. They're out there protecting a princess. They've gotten overrun by Cersei's simps. And what's episode 3 going to do? Continue that or do something completely different? Let's talk about it right now. All right, episode 3 centers around this guy. That's right, G.I. Robot. That's right. For those of you who don't know much about G.I. Robot, you get a little crash course in this episode. Don't need to know a lot. They're just going to tell you everything you need to know for this show through some flashbacks through the war. He's there. And remember, he's programmed. He's like an AI thing that's programmed to kill the Yahtzees. And that's what he does. He's like there with the Easy Company, and they've been surrounded. It's an awful situation for them. And then they cut to him celebrating in a little bar, and that's how it goes. They kind of have this little back and forth between real time, and then they come to find out the bride is there. She's all muffled. Why are you? What she's trying to say something, and she's trying to say nothing. They're all gone. She is trying to say, "Get the thing off my mouth." This is about the extent of Rick flatting bride that we get in this episode. So, despite what happened in the first episodes, which I guess was the setup, I mean, it was Bride's backstory, which was full of necrophilia and, her own sort of stalker in Eric Frankenstein. But just put all that on the shelf for now. I'm sure we'll get back to it at some point, but for now, that's not going to be the focus. This entire focus is going to be on GI Robot. Now, G.I. Robot has a little moment here with Nina, the fish girl. Now, we do get to know her name a little more because they actually repeat it several times. And he's just sweet to her. And he's like, I'm sad. I can't kill Nazis, whatever. I'm trapped in the bathtub. And it's sort of that. Like, it's showing that the AI robot guy kind of has a heart, is basically what we're doing. And by the way, after this little brief intro, the episode is only like 18 minutes long. So it's not as though there's a lot of time wasted. It's a very long episode. It's only like 20 minutes. They realize everything is a setup and Cersei has tricked them to leave the princess unguarded by all the monsters. So they realize they got to race right back to the castle to protect the princess. But throughout the episode, we just get G.I. Robot's story, and he's going to like a TV show, and he's commandeered by this scientist who's going to explore his artificial intelligence and what he's actually capable of doing or not doing, basically how sentient G.I. Robot is. And then we kind of have these moments before we cut back to the princess, and then there's this massive attack sequence. And the attack sequence is completely insane, and the simps, of course, are there. She kind of gets a little bit of this upper hand briefly, and grabs a gun and it goes off and she's covered in blood splatter. And I want to stay here just for a minute because this is possibly coming up on what will be one of the biggest goofs in animated history. I can't remember something this big. Now, there are tons of continuity issues and errors in animation over the years. People pause, people talk about them, all those kinds of things. This one is so intense. Let me make this big for you guys because you guys can see. She is covered in blood splatter. So just put a pin in that. Because when we cut back to the princess a little bit later, because we have some GI robot stuff that we'll get to, we'll talk about more of the episode. But when they cut back to her, she's being chased down and cornered. Notice all of the blood splatter is gone. Completely gone. It's not even on her clothes anymore. This isn't a continuity department. This is an animated show. I mocked in the first 2 episodes that we have musical montage sequences and aerial second unit type shots, and Steven Ransom called me out on that. But how on earth can we have a graphic continuity error of this magnitude in an animated show? This isn't like a glitch in a frame or an animator who stuck something in. This is absolutely inexcusable, in my opinion. All right, well, that's enough of me ranting about the quality of the show and some of the issues that I have with the simps and how just they're armed to the teeth, but this big battle is raging before the monsters show up, and the monsters are just kicking butt and taking names. Cut back, G.I. Robot. So G.I. Robot was bought by this sort of like war aficionado, a sort of like war memorabilia collector, if you will. And it's kind of sweet at first. You're kind of, oh, how nice. And I'm actually kind of reminded that Jeff Johns created a very similar character to G.I. Robot who may have kind of ripped off G.I. Robot a little bit. So I'm not going to get into that right now, but I felt that watching this episode. I was like, huh, it's a lot more similar than I remembered. Anyway, GI Robot has this thing, and he's going to go to quote a meeting, and they're going to go to said meeting, and GI Robot's like taking some note of a couple of little signs and symptoms and things that are there. Because at the meeting, after seeing a swastika and some other clues, GI Robot realizes that these are not good people. They actually are Nazis, and he starts taking all of them out. And it's just this gratuitous scene. Then we flash back to the current after Rick Flag says, "Hey, yeah, they're Nazis," and he's just literally just mowing them down. And he has like glee. He's changing the weapons, and they have a cut between the past and the future. And that's basically what we get. We find out how he was arrested for it and kind of face consequences for this crazy brutality. And it's extremely insane and graphic. It almost reminds me more of like heavy metal and that type of animation. And he doesn't have a place. He doesn't know what to do. There's nothing to do for him. And that's how he ended up in Belle Reve prison. And obviously, Amanda Waller gets to him. And yeah, so they cut back to the princess. They got to save the day before Cersei shows up because she gets to jump on everybody. Now, again, we cleaned the princess up. It's so absurd that we went from the earlier scene to this scene. But nope, we're going to have a little twist that you're not going to see coming. That's right. Uh, Weasel attacks, and Weasel is just gruesome and graphic and intense, and it's kind of crazy. I don't know how Cersei being so powerful would not be able to fend him off. They kind of have that power set issue where we're just going to say this happens. I guess I'm going to presume that he gets her from behind, so he's on her back and her shoulders. It's not really like she had a chance to use any of her powers or magic, but that's what we're going to do. And then, of course, there's a quick little shot of all that playing out where Dr. Phosphorus puts his hand on her and says, "Oh, no, the real thing is coming. You know, the real threat is coming. It's not really about me at all." And all that. And you can see that's what she's basically doing. So I'm not sure that there was any real value in the first 3 episodes because it's some other thing that's out there. So why did they focus on GI Robot? They have this great animation setting it all up, and they cut to the current time, and you have where he is like in glee and joy. He's mowing down the Yahtzees, as you can see, and then his head is rightly blown right off by Cersei. So shock and horror and chaos breaks out, and that's how the story had picked up. So let me say this: better episode than the previous 2. At least there is story. We like GI Robot. We're sad that he was blown apart. We don't really think he's gone forever. We also like the fact that at least something happened with Weasel that makes some sense. But we also wasted other time with other characters. Like we don't really get to know anybody. It's just a story. So if we're going to do like Walking Dead type storytelling, which Walking Dead is one of my pet peeves of Walking Dead is, it seems like they would just take whole episodes off to tell like one story. And I always found that to be kind of weak. Like you didn't find ways to navigate back and forth. And if I'm a viewer and that's not my favorite character, I have less interest in that character. I'm kind of tuned out for an episode. It's just a throwaway episode for me. And sometimes there aren't even good payoffs for said things. And GI Robot has its moment. And yes, it was set up for that moment, but that's a lot of time served. It's a whole episode basically of just one moment, and then to get to Cersei, who's like, "Oh yeah, I'm not really the big bad. There's some other big bad." So, all in all, show's not the worst thing in the world. Not as good as I had hoped, and definitely not as good as people that are simping for the DCU and James Gunn. It's a tolerable show. It still doesn't really resemble a lot of the comic book lore and things like that. It's piecing things together, but not necessarily something I can point to and go, "Hey, listen, go read Weird War Tales." Well, you're going to see commandos, you're going to see the creatures, but it's all different. You're going to see a lot of things that you're not going to recognize. But all in all, it's not the worst show in the world. This is a very good episode to kind of redeem the show on the right track for the most part. And before I go, let me just say, though, I can't really forgive them for having such a gratuitous continuity error where they have blood splatter all over someone and then like a moment later, there's just nothing on them. It's really, really bad. I don't totally understand how something that got through, even the editing process, the screening process. It jumps out at you so bad. I don't know how that actually happens. The other thing, too, is we're really, again, leaning into hardcore rated R content. This is not for children. We're talking about heavy metal as a good example of this type of animation that he's inspired by, obviously, with the blood splatter and human flesh just ripped apart. not something that kids are going to want to watch. So what is the target audience, and why is that the target audience? So that kind of remains to be seen. Like, where are we going with the DCU? If we're going to make content that's not going to be for children, we're not going to try to lure anyone into buying comics into their universe, then how does that help their overall box office for, say, Superman, or their overall box office for Batman projects? Because you need kids, you need toys, you need all the stuff that goes with building the franchise as a whole. So that's my take on it. Love to hear more from you guys. Take care, everybody. I am Pops.